Mike Henderson wiped the sweat from his brow and stared at the cracked foundation wall of his basement. It had been a long day. Renovating this old house was supposed to be a weekend project, but the deeper he dug, the more issues he found: rot, rust, and now what looked like a collapsed section of stonework. Should have just hired someone, he muttered to himself, adjusting his gloves and gripping the sledgehammer. With a grunt, he swung the hammer at the wall. Dust and debris rained down as a section crumbled inward. Instead of loose earth, the sound of metal rang out sharply. Mike froze. He knelt down, brushing away dirt to reveal the faint gleam of something metallic. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. Using a crowbar, he chipped away at the surrounding stone, revealing more of the object. It was a smooth, metallic surface, oddly warm to the touch. Strange, glowing lines formed intricate patterns across its surface, pulsating faintly like veins carrying electric blue light. The object was large, at least 6 feet long, and shaped like a streamlined capsule. It didn't belong here. This wasn't part of any house he knew of, old or new. Adrenaline surged as 1,000 questions raced through his mind. Had he stumbled upon some kind of old military tech? A forgotten experiment? Or something else entirely? He grabbed his phone, its flashlight illuminating the pod's surface. Up close, the glowing lines almost seemed alive, pulsing in rhythm with his racing heartbeat. There was an inscription near the top, composed of symbols that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves when he stared too long. His skin prickled as the air seemed to grow heavy with static. "Maybe I shouldn't mess with this," Mike said aloud, though he couldn't seem to look away. His curiosity, however, had always been his undoing. Pulling a toolset closer, he tried to pry open what looked like a seam near the pod's top. As he applied pressure, the glowing lines brightened, and a soft hum filled the room. He froze, ready to bolt, but the hum grew louder, almost soothing, like a lullaby sung by machines. With a hiss of air, the pod's lid began to lift, its motion smooth and silent. A faint mist escaped, curling along the basement floor. Mike's breath caught as he peered inside. She lay there, seemingly asleep, her hands crossed over her chest. Her skin shimmered with iridescent hues, as if it couldn't decide on a single color. Her hair spilled around her in waves, glowing faintly like strands of liquid light. She was human-like, but impossibly otherworldly, her features too perfect, too symmetrical to belong to anyone from Earth. Mike took a shaky step back, his heart hammering in his chest. "Oh, no. No, no, no. This can't be real." Her eyes snapped open. They were the color of emeralds, glowing softly in the dim light. For a moment, they locked onto his, and a strange feeling swept over him, a mix of awe, terror, and an inexplicable connection, as if she were reaching out to his very soul. She sat up in the pod with an elegance that defied physics. Her gaze swept the room, taking in her surroundings before settling back on him. When she spoke, her voice was like a symphony of whispers and wind, incomprehensible but oddly soothing. I don't understand you," Mike stammered, raising his hands instinctively. The symbols on the pod began to glow brighter, casting intricate patterns on the walls. The alien woman tilted her head, and suddenly her musical tones shifted, her words blending into English, clear and crisp. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice melodic and calm. Mike stared at her, his mind struggling to process the enormity of what was happening. Earth. My basement." Her glowing eyes narrowed slightly in thought. "Earth," she repeated softly, almost reverently, as if testing the word. Then, her gaze turned back to him. "You released me. My name is Lyra." "Lyra," Mike echoed, as if saying her name would help him wake up from this dream. His legs felt like jelly, and he stumbled back, grabbing onto a workbench for support. "You are not like the others," she said, her voice filled with a strange, haunting kindness. "Thank you for finding me." Mike couldn't find his voice. All he could do was stare, his mind screaming at him to run while his body refused to move. Somewhere in the back of his head, a thought bubbled to the surface. What the hell have I gotten myself into? Mike stood frozen, his eyes locked on Lyra as she gracefully stepped out of the pod. Her movements were unlike anything he'd seen, fluid, almost weightless, as though she floated rather than walked. The faint hum of the pod quieted, and the glowing lines on its surface dimmed to a soft pulse, like a heartbeat at rest. Lyra scanned the basement, her gaze lingering on the bare concrete walls and the scattered tools on Mike's workbench. "This is primitive," she said softly, her voice laced with curiosity rather than disdain. "Primitive?" Mike found his voice at last, though it cracked slightly. "You just climbed out of a glowing space pod, and you're calling my basement primitive?" Her lips curved into a faint smile. Not an insult. Merely an observation. She tilted her head, studying him. "You seem afraid." Mike swallowed hard. "Afraid? No. Just confused. Shocked. Maybe a little terrified. Who wouldn't be?" She stepped closer, and he instinctively backed up, bumping into the wall. "I mean you no harm," she said, stopping a few feet away. "In fact, I owe you my life." "Your life?" Lyra nodded, her hair shimmering as she moved. "The pod was designed to protect me, to preserve me until it could find a safe environment. But its systems were failing. I would not have awakened if you hadn't disturbed its containment seal." Mike's mind spun. "So you're an alien? From space?" "Yes," she replied simply. "Though not in the way you might think. My people are travelers. Explorers. We chart the stars, seeking knowledge, alliances. Sanctuary." He blinked. "Sanctuary? From what?" Her expression darkened, and for the first time, Mike saw something akin to fear flicker in her glowing eyes. "War," she said quietly. "A conflict that consumed my home. Our technology allowed some of us to escape, but we scattered to the far reaches of the universe, each seeking refuge. My pod was damaged during the journey and entered a dormant state when it arrived here." Mike rubbed his temples, struggling to keep up. "So you've just been down here? How long?" She glanced at the pod, her fingers brushing over its surface as if it were a dear friend. "Time is difficult to measure in stasis. By your calendar. Centuries, perhaps. The pod systems sustained me, but the energy reserves were nearly depleted. Another few cycles, and I would have perished." Mike let out a low whistle. "Centuries. That's a lot to take in." Lyra looked at him intently. "I understand this must be overwhelming for you. I can sense your mind racing. But I must ask for your help." "Help? Me?" He gestured vaguely at his surroundings. "Lady, I'm just a guy with a leaky basement and a half-finished electrical job. What could I possibly do to help someone like you?" Her expression softened. "You found me. You are resourceful, curious, and unafraid to act despite your fear. That makes you unique among those I've encountered." Mike raised an eyebrow. "You've met others?" "Not directly," she said. "The pod sensors detected life forms. I studied their languages, their behaviors. But there was no safe way to make contact. Not until now." Mike frowned. "Wait. Are you saying you've been watching us?" Lyra nodded. "Observing. Learning. I had to understand this world before I could risk revealing myself. But now, I have no choice. My people need to know I am alive. And I need to warn yours." "Warn us?" Mike's stomach sank. "About what?" She hesitated, her glowing eyes dimming slightly. "The ones who destroyed my home," she said finally. "They are hunters, conquerors. They will not stop until they control everything. If they discover Earth. She trailed off, letting the implications hang in the air. Mike exhaled slowly, his fear giving way to a grim determination. Okay. Let's say I believe you and I'm not saying I do. What exactly do you need me to do? Lyra's expression brightened, a spark of hope lighting her features. The pod's communication systems are damaged, but they are not beyond repair. With your tools and materials, I can fix them. Once restored, I can send a message to my people. Mike crossed his arms. And what happens when your people get the message? Do they show up here with spaceships and lasers? They will come in peace, Lyra said firmly. To help protect your world, if it comes to that. Mike studied her for a long moment, his skepticism warring with a growing sense of responsibility. Finally, he sighed. All right. Let's get to work. A smile spread across Lyra's face, and for a moment, she looked almost human. Thank you, Mike. As they began to gather tools and assess the damage to the pod, Mike couldn't help but glance at her every so often. He didn't fully trust her yet, how could he? But something in her eyes, and the way she carried herself, told him she was telling the truth. And if there was even a chance that what she said was real, then he had no choice but to help. Because if Lyra was right, the fate of the world might just depend on it. The basement had transformed into a makeshift workshop. Mike's scattered tools now surrounded the alien pod, alongside a jumbled array of wires, spare parts, and makeshift circuitry Lyra had salvaged from the pod's damaged systems. She worked with a precision that left Mike in awe, her glowing fingers moving deftly over connections as if she could feel the flow of energy. Mike leaned against the wall, watching her assemble what she called a relay amplifier using parts from an old radio and a car battery. So, he asked, breaking the silence, you're telling me this thing can call your people? Even from Earth? Lyra nodded, not looking up from her work. Yes. The pod's core systems are designed to communicate over vast distances, but they were heavily damaged in transit. With this amplifier, I can boost the signal enough to send a short message. Mike frowned. A short message? That's it? Like, hey, it's me, Lyra. Come pick me up? Her lips curved into a faint smile. Not quite. The message will contain encoded data, my location, my identity, and a warning about the state of your planet. Mike stiffened. Wait. What do you mean, the state of our planet? Are you saying they're already coming? Lyra set the relay down and met his gaze. Her glowing green eyes softened, tinged with something that looked like regret. Not yet. But it is only a matter of time. The species that destroyed my world are relentless. They scour the galaxy for habitable planets and resources. If they detect Earth, they will come. Mike's stomach churned. So, what? We're just a giant target? Your world is unique, Lyra said. Its resources, its atmosphere, its abundance of life, all of it makes Earth a beacon for those who seek to conquer. My people knew of Earth's existence, but deemed it too fragile to involve in galactic affairs. That fragility may now be your greatest risk. Mike slumped into a chair, rubbing his temples. Great. Just great. As if we don't already have enough problems down here. Lyra tilted her head. Your species is resilient. I've observed your history, your ingenuity. You may not be prepared for what's coming, but you have the potential to be. He let out a bitter laugh. Yeah? Tell that to the people who can't agree on basic stuff, let alone unite against an alien invasion. Lyra's expression grew serious. That is why I must send this message. My people can help. We are few, but we have knowledge and technology that could give you a chance. Mike sat in silence, the weight of her words pressing down on him. Despite his skepticism, he couldn't ignore the truth in her voice or the strange connection he felt to her. She wasn't just talking about survival. She was talking about hope. Lyra broke the silence, her voice softer now. Mike, I know this is not your fight. You've already risked much by helping me. If you wish to step away, I will understand. He looked up at her, surprised. Step away? Are you kidding me? If what you're saying is true, then this fight is everyone's. Besides, he smirked faintly. I don't think I could go back to my normal life knowing there's a glowing alien lady in my basement. She smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression. Then let's finish this. Hours passed as they worked side by side, and slowly, the pieces began to come together. Mike learned more about Lyra's people, the Ellerin, a race of explorers who had once thrived among the stars. She spoke of their elegant starships, their cities built on floating islands of light, and their philosophy of peaceful exploration. But she also spoke of the hunters, a brutal, expansionist species that had emerged from the shadows of the galaxy. They had no homeworld, no single base of operations. Instead, they roamed like locusts, consuming everything in their path. It was the hunters who had destroyed Ellerin civilization, scattering the survivors across the universe. They are efficient and relentless, Lyra said as she tightened a wire. Once they discover a world, it rarely survives. Mike shivered. How do we even fight something like that? Unity, Lyra replied firmly. Your species has its flaws, but it also has its strength. You have ingenuity, creativity, and an unparalleled drive to survive. The hunters are powerful, but they lack imagination. That is your greatest weapon. Mike chuckled weakly. Imagination, huh? I hope that's enough. As midnight approached, the relay amplifier was complete. Lyra placed her hand on the pod, and the intricate symbols etched into its surface began to glow brighter. A soft hum filled the room, building into a steady rhythm like a heartbeat. It's ready, Lyra said, her voice tinged with anticipation. Once I send the signal, it will take time for my people to respond. Days, perhaps weeks. But they will come. Mike crossed his arms. And what happens then? Do they just show up and help us build some kind of intergalactic defense system? Lyra hesitated, a shadow crossing her face. I cannot promise how they will respond. Many of us are broken, scattered. But there are those who still believe in our mission to protect, to preserve. I will convince them to help. Mike nodded, his jaw tightening. Then let's do it. Lyra placed her hand over a glowing panel, and a surge of energy pulsed through the room. The symbols on the pod brightened, casting swirling patterns of light across the walls. The hum reached a crescendo, then faded into silence. It is done, she said softly. Mike let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Now what? Lyra turned to him, her expression unreadable. Now. We wait. As the basement settled into an uneasy quiet, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that their message had stirred more than just hope. Somewhere out there, among the stars, something or someone was listening. The days after sending the signal passed in a haze of anticipation and unease. Mike returned to his usual routines, work, errands, and mundane distractions, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every sound from the basement made his heart race. Every glance at the night sky felt heavier, as if the stars were watching him back. Lyra, in contrast, remained calm and focused. She spent her time repairing the pod systems, meditating, and teaching Mike about the wider universe. Through her stories, he began to see Earth not as an isolated speck, but as a fragile, precious gem in a sea of stars. She often spoke of the Ellerin's philosophy of harmony and exploration, though a shadow always crossed her face when the topic of their downfall arose. One night, nearly 2 weeks after the signal was sent, Mike was in the kitchen making coffee when the lights flickered. His pulse quickened, and he sprinted to the basement. Lyra, he called. She was already at the pod, her eyes glowing brightly as the device emitted a low, resonant hum. The symbols on its surface pulsed rhythmically, filling the room with a soft, golden light. It's them, she said, her voice a mix of relief and resolve. They've received the signal. Mike stepped closer, his throat dry. What happens now? Lyra placed her hands on the pod, her expression serene. They are approaching. A ship will enter your atmosphere soon. I must guide them to a safe landing. Mike felt a mix of awe and dread. Wait. They're coming here? To my house? She glanced at him, a faint smile on her lips. Not to your house, but nearby. They will remain hidden, as we do not wish to alarm your people. I will meet them and explain everything. Mike hesitated, a pang of worry cutting through his chest. And then what? Do you leave with them? Lyra's expression softened. I must. My mission is not over. But this is not a farewell. If my people agree, we will return to help protect your world. You have my word. Mike nodded, though the thought of her leaving stung more than he cared to admit. Well, let's get this done then. Hours later, under the cover of night, Mike drove Lyra to an open field on the outskirts of town. The location she'd chosen was secluded, surrounded by dense trees and far from prying eyes. As they arrived, the air grew heavy, crackling with static energy. They're close, Lyra said, stepping out of the truck. Mike followed her, looking up at the sky. At first, there was nothing but stars. Then, one by one, they began to disappear, eclipsed by a massive, dark shape descending silently from above. The ship was unlike anything Mike could have imagined, a sleek, angular craft that seemed to ripple like liquid metal, reflecting the faint light of the moon. A soft hum filled the air as the ship hovered a few feet above the ground. A hatch opened, and a ramp extended, glowing faintly. Two figures emerged, their forms silhouetted against the ship's light. They were tall and elegant, their features similar to Lyra's but more severe, their bodies wrapped in shimmering fabrics that seemed to shift colors as they moved. The taller of the two spoke, their voice resonating in the air like a choir. Lyra. You survived. Lyra stepped forward, her posture straight and dignified. I did. And I have found allies. The alien's gaze shifted to Mike, who suddenly felt very small under their scrutiny. This is the one who aided you? Lyra nodded. Yes. His name is Mike. He is brave, resourceful, and represents the best of what this world has to offer. Mike blinked, caught off guard by her words. Thanks, I guess. The alien tilted their head, as if appraising him. Curious, they said simply, then turned back to Lyra. You have done well. The council will be pleased. Lyra's shoulders relaxed slightly, but her tone remained firm. We must act quickly. Earth is vulnerable. If the hunters detect this world, they will destroy it. The second figure, a woman with a softer demeanor, nodded. We agree. This planet must be protected. But we are few, Lyra. Our resources are limited. Then we will teach them, Lyra said. Earth has potential. Their people are resilient, and with guidance, they could become strong enough to defend themselves. The two aliens exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the taller one spoke. Very well. We will consult the council, but for now, you may remain to oversee preparations. The fate of this world is not yet sealed. Mike's chest tightened. Wait. You're staying? Lyra turned to him, her glowing eyes filled with a mixture of hope and gratitude. For now. There is much work to do, and I cannot do it alone. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Good. Because, I think I'd miss having you around. Her smile was warm, almost human. And I would miss your humor, Mike. The ship's light dimmed as it lifted off, vanishing into the night sky. Lyra watched it go, her expression thoughtful. What now? Mike asked. She turned to him, determination shining in her eyes. Now, we prepare your world for what lies ahead. Mike nodded, a strange sense of purpose settling over him. For the first time, he didn't feel overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. He felt ready. Because with Lyra by his side, the stars no longer seemed so far away.